intellectual disabilities and show how it's used to evaluate a social program. Now, the ugly guy over on my right shoulder here is Donald Campbell. Donald Campbell was a psychologist, and in 1969, Donald Campbell wrote an article called Reforms as Experiments. Right at the start of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, Campbell comes along and says, you can't just implement reforms as if they're going to work. You need to evaluate them. You need to hold them to the same scrutiny that you hold a scientific experiment. You need to see if something's going to work. Well, Campbell was an empiricist. In fact, I kind of think of him as the patron saint of empiricists, because he's the guy that we all studied in graduate school, the Campbell and Stanley book that talked about designs and everything like that. So I'm really impressed that he called for the taking a look at whether things actually work. Now, the intellectual disability field has actually done a pretty good job of using data and using data to evaluate social reforms. When Judge Broderick ordered the closure of Pennhurst Center back in 1977 is when it started, the Health and Human Services Department of the United States ordered a grand study. They wanted to find out what happens when you order people out of a state center and into community programs. Now, we were using community programs at that point, but that was really the first major study. It was first broadly inclusive study. Two groups won that contract. One was Temple University with Jim Conroy as the principal investigator, and the other was Human Services Research Institute in Boston with Val Bradley being the head of that. So Conroy and Bradley did a study, and they evaluated what happens to people when you leave the Pennhurst Center and move to community homes. And a couple of things they found is that skill levels got better. People evidenced new skills. Now, candidly, sometimes that was because they had more expectations placed on them. If you don't have a commissary delivering food to your home, you have to cook it yourself, you learn to cook a little bit. If you don't have a maid or a housekeeper cleaning, you learn to do a little cleaning. Integration increased. People were out in the community, they were becoming to some extent part of the community. People that were able to participate in interviews suggested they were happier. They liked it better in the community. Community was cheaper, maybe on the backs of the staff that worked there, but cheaper. And the most interesting thing I thought was that the families liked it. The most interesting part of the Pennhurst study, they asked parents prior to their son or daughter leaving Pennhurst, are you satisfied with Pennhurst? Roughly 87% of the group said, yeah, I'm satisfied with Pennhurst. Now, those of you that have been through Pennhurst might find that a kind of a remarkable position to take, but that was what it was. 6 months after their son or daughter moved to a community program, approximately the same 87% said, I'm satisfied with community placement. So things worked. It was kind of novel in that here we have a social reform that really, really worked. And things got better for people. Conroy's study wasn't the first study to look at deinstitutionalization. There had been a bunch since. His was the first one that was broadly inclusive and looked at a lot of dimensions of the basic question of, are people better off? But the key finding came down that people were better off. A bunch of other studies were done that basically followed Conroy's work and Bradley's work and came up with similar conclusions. Adaptive skills increase, people are more integrated with the community, they're happier, the programs were cheaper. Steve Taylor, who was the editor of Mental Retardation and from Syracuse University, pointed out that yeah, it's cheaper, but it's only cheaper because we're not paying the direct support professionals well enough. The vocational programs may be a little bit weaker, but more integrated. So it was an odd mixture of results on that. You probably could conclude that the deinstitutionalization program dealing with people with intellectual disability has worked. It's been a successful program, but you don't really stop with just a summative evaluation. You really need to take the next step and say, all right, let's look closely. Let's look, what are the details? What are the strong points? What are the weak points? And one of the concerns that came up has to do with vocational. Not everybody gained in skills. Not everybody became happier. It's an average, and so you got to explore things a little closer. I was involved with the Center for Outcome Analysis for a number of years, and we had a contract with Oklahoma to study their deinstitutionalization movement and the closure of 2 state centers in Oklahoma. And first study we did, we had the opportunity to compare people that were living in the state center in Hissom, Oklahoma, with people that were living in the community, having been released from Hissom. And it was a matched sample study, 200 in each group. And when we looked at the vocational area, this was the one key area. Everything else was the standard outcomes that you get from all the deinstitutionalization studies: more adaptive behavior, more integration, happier, cheaper. But the vocational area was kind of odd. In contrast to the state center, where 99% of the people got up every day and did some kind of work, only about 51% of the people that lived in the community homes got up and worked. On the other hand, those that did get up and work, that lived in the community, had more socially integrated jobs. Competitive employment, supported employment, not really sheltered workshops. Most of the people in the state center worked in sheltered workshops. So you had a mixture of results there. 15 years passed, and we still had the contract, and we're still doing analyses of it. And so I decided to pull data from 15 years of people that have been living in the community for 15 years and see what happened to their employment. And I found at the start of the study, about 40% of the people were working in a sheltered workshop. About 40% were working in some sort of supported or competitive employment. And the remaining 20 were a scattering of day programs and retirement programs, or whatever the case may be. Over the course of 15 years, the percentages of people that were in competitive, supported, integrated forms of employment stayed about the same. A little bit slight drop, I don't know that it was big enough to make a difference, but basically held the same. People in sheltered workshops dropped down to about 13%, 40% down to 13%. Now, our study didn't really let us go deep enough to ask the question, where'd to go? So we started calling up people that worked in Oklahoma and asking, what's going on here? What happened to these people? And apparently, what happened was a form of essentially unemployment. They stayed home. The workers in the homes in Oklahoma developed a term for this. They called it option quest. What it meant was there's a quest to find options to do something with these people during the day. It was a pejorative term that they came up with. They weren't saying this is particularly cool. It wasn't an ideal sort of situation. So it points out that there's some problems there. And this relates to some of the issues that we're talking about today around sheltered workshops. You know, as we're moving to the Employment First initiative and as states are trying to limit access to workshops, I think the Oklahoma study offers a warning. It doesn't say don't do it. It says take some caution and do it right. If you note, Rhode Island, when they basically closed the front doors to sheltered workshops. You can still work in a sheltered workshop if you work there today, but if you want to enter the system, you can't go into a sheltered workshop. Then an impact of that is that people applying to live in group homes aren't getting accepted because the group home provider is responsible for finding a day program, and there's no day programs for them. So you're getting an increase in their waiting list. In Maine, we found a similar situation with people dropping down in the percentage of time that they spend engaged in work activity. So there's problems in the vocational area. And I think it offers us an issue of warning. Now, the next question is always going to be, where's the innovation? You've told me, some data, okay, that's a research study, that's a publication, that's nice, but where's the innovation? And being a researcher, I was a little baffled by that. I don't do the innovation, I do studies. But the convenient thing is, when she asked this, I had just been asked by Representative Tom Burr to generate some ideas on how we might stimulate employment opportunities for people. So let me throw a couple out. So where's some of the innovation? One of them, let's create businesses. I know my own company, Wood Services, for years has had a flower shop. We ran it on campus and we sold to each other, which didn't make any sense in any sort of a way. So first thing we did was we rented a kiosk in the Oxford Valley Mall. And we put people working there, selling flowers and gifts and other things to people in the mall, giving them lots of experience interacting with the public. It was pretty good. We had an opportunity to rent a shop in a local Langhorne strip mall, and we did that, and we now have Yellow Daffodil in the strip mall as well. So we're creating a business. I see Graham Gill sitting out here, and Graham runs a bowling alley. And bowling alley is just something he found in his building where he runs a workshop, but he's able to use funds from that to help support people in the program. So that's a pretty creative idea as well. The notion of us setting up businesses and being able to support our programs and help people experience community life is certainly one option. Option two, there we go, incentivize employers. Now there are a number of incentive programs. There are 6 states that offer some sort of incentive to hire people with disabilities. The federal government offers a modest incentive to hire people with disabilities. They're all nice ideas, but you know, if they were really all that good, we wouldn't need them. We'd all know about them. I guess that's a better issue. They're not that significant a player. One of the reasons they're not significant players is that for an incentive to work, and frankly, as a behaviorist, I think incentives do drive people's behavior, but they gotta be big enough that you notice. You know, I looked at some of the incentive programs from the different states. They're pretty small. They're modest. They last 1 year, $2,000 if you hire somebody full-time. That might not be enough to motivate you to create new jobs or to hire people preferentially. So the incentives got to get a little bigger. Thirdly, preferential contracting. There are a number of states that require agencies contracting with the states to hire people with disabilities. Maryland in particular has a good program that requires a certain percentage of workers that have disabilities to work on your company to get a government contract. Another state has a bid awarding system where you get your proposals graded. You get 10 extra points if you're predominantly or you have a significant portion of persons with disabilities working there. So that enhances it a bit. And another idea, a lot of employers are reticent to hire people with disabilities. They're afraid that maybe they're hard to get rid of if they're not good workers. Maybe they just can't do the job that we want them to do. And Team's suggestion is, let's create employment agencies. Much like we have nursing agencies, when we need a nurse, we can bring a nurse in. Let's create a staffing agency where we absorb the risk and we provide the services under a contract with employers, that people still work in an integrated setting that way. Finally, we need to look at disincentives that exist right now for working. Medicaid benefits sometimes place limits on how much somebody can make or how much they can hold. Now, the ABLE accounts that are coming out now or out now should be a help in reducing the impact of that, but we need to make sure that people don't lose benefits by working. Now, Maryland in particular has a guarantee that you don't lose Medicaid if you're working. I guess the last thing I want to say is, I think the most important innovation is that of stop selling innovations as if they're ideas that are guaranteed to work. You need to evaluate them. You need to follow Don Campbell's admonition to treat any reform as an experiment. And so whether it's moving people into competitive employment or whether it's any other form of innovation we do, we have a responsibility to the people we support to make sure that it works and to be able to say definitively whether it works. That's it. Thank you very much.